Now for an update as to what I've been doing, the most interesting thing is that it's Ramadan. It's actually the 4th day of Ramadan. Now, as you know, Ramadan is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Every year during the month of Ramadan, Muslims are required to fast, at least in theory, through the daylight hours. In the Gambia, what this actually translates to is 5 o'clock a.m. to 7 o'clock p.m., which doesn't exactly line up with the sun, but it's close enough. And actually makes it a little more difficult. Here, this close to the equator, we almost always have pretty close to 12-hour days, and this makes it a 14-hour day. Some other interesting things, though, that I've learned about Ramadan since being here. The first is that you can be exempt from it. For example, if you are a pregnant woman, or if you are sick, or if you are traveling, anything that falls under the general realm of health, you are allowed to opt out for those days if you like. But that said, if you do, you have to make them up during other parts of the year. Additionally, women who are on their menstrual cycle are not allowed to fast during these days. You can make of that as you will. I'm not going to speculate on it. Another thing that's important to mention, you're not allowed to drink either. Fasting means abstaining from food and drink. If it's consumed, you don't do it, with the exception of medicine. This may actually vary throughout the Islamic world, but that's how it is in the Gambia. And as the last sort of fascinating thing I've learned about Ramadan is that it really does seem to be in many ways, at least here in the Gambia, a celebration of food and eating. Gambians get all excited about the special foods that they eat when they break the fast. That's what the first evening meal is called, the break fast. Not to be confusing or anything. Literally, this is literally the etymology of breakfast is break fast, but in this case they are literally breaking the fast, whereas the actual breakfast meal is not breaking the fast, so it's the break fast and what we call breakfast, which isn't actually breakfast. Not during Ramadan. I'm actually participating in Ramadan this year, and I'm doing it for a variety of reasons. A lot of Peace Corps volunteers fast for Ramadan, and the big reason why is cultural integration. It's a good way to celebrate the holidays with the family, because this is a big trial that everybody in your village, except for the few Christian compounds, is going to be going through. So this is a good way to interconnect and live the experiences that they are living, at least to some extent. So as far as some of my experiences in Ramadan, I can say that it's been less difficult than I was expecting. The first day was incredibly difficult. I was extremely parched, had a huge headache, was exhausted by the end of it, but by the second day I felt fine, and, well, maybe not fine, but just a little tired and a little thirsty. Yeah, the first day was awful. In part, that was because I didn't actually have dasamai. I'm not going to call it breakfast because, well, you just had this conversation. My host brother wasn't able to buy bread the night before the first day, which meant that we weren't actually able to eat dasamai. Instead of a 14-hour day, it was more like a 24-hour day. Maybe a little less than that. Which I think is probably a good explanation for the headache. And I've also started adopting some other methods that make life easier, one of which is quite simply drinking a lot. Another Peace Corps volunteer named Magruder told me and a few other PCVs that the way to survive Ramadan is by drinking 3 liters of water every night. Given that I have 1.5 liter bottles of water that I drink out of every day, this is actually a pretty easy thing to do. Although I have to confess, what normally ends up happening is this means I have to pee really bad all morning. But I survive through the day, and that's what matters. Well, bringing up something you brought up last time, specifically the fact that you don't think you have anything to talk about. Throughout most of my life, whenever somebody has asked, "What's up with you?" I've always been, "Oh, nothing much," has said that there wasn't anything happening, anything new or interesting with my life, and the fact is that's something that still happens in Africa. But the simple fact is, the idiom is true. Every day is a new and interesting experience. We often think that we have to go on a big adventure in life to do that, to find and experience new things, things that are different. But that said, every one of us is living a different life. I don't know what you're going through half the time. You don't know what I'm going through half the time. We all have different life experiences. We all don't know what one another doesn't know about one another. So when it comes to education or sharing about the world we live in, the honest to God truth is that we all have something to share. We all have something interesting to say. But that said, I think we often don't look for it. We don't look for the interesting things in our lives. We aren't searching for what's already there in front of us. We are looking for what's outside of our lives because our day-to-day lives are something that we don't tend to think of as interesting ever, because to us they are the mundane, everyday experiences. But that said, they're not everybody's everyday mundane experiences. To someone else, they may be fantastic. We all go through interesting experiences, and what I'm coming to the conclusion of is one of the keys to having a good life filled with interesting talking points, I think, is being able to call out what our adventures are. Adventure, or living a life of adventure, of interest, of stories, of fascination. It isn't about going and doing interesting things. Although that is a part of it, the bigger thing is being able to look at what you have done and see what is interesting within it. Take, for example, your life. You talked about how you don't have anything to talk about last episode, and then immediately brought up side projects. You've clearly got your projects, and then you've got 50 plus hours worth of training and new content that you could be talking about. Come on, you're clearly living an interesting life. You're clearly doing cool stuff. I also want to point out that even though you're apparently not doing anything interesting right now, you sent me this picture a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago at this point. Yeah, clearly nothing interesting is going on here. And if you go further back in time to when we were living together, you would talk for hours and hours about a wine that I wouldn't even be able to pronounce or describe in any meaningful way, and then go into a talk about how frustrating your work was. Even when we were freaking little kids, children, there were talking points that we could find, points of common interest, even though we were living the mundane lives of children. We were definitely not having adventures anywhere near the adventures we're having now by the rest of society's standards, yet we still found interesting talking points. And even here in Africa, when people ask me what's up, I oftentimes go with the simple, oh, nothing much, even though every new day is filled with new experiences that are going to be foreign to not only the people I live with, not only the people back home like you, but also to the other Peace Corps volunteers. We all come from different backgrounds and view the world differently. Even if there are common threads, they're not the same. We're all having our own separate adventures. You don't have to go all the way to Africa. You don't have to cross the country to live an interesting life. You don't need to leave your home to have an adventure. You don't need to go far and wide. You don't need to travel the world. Adventure is right outside your door, right inside your door. Adventure is right there under your nose for you to find. Figure out what is interesting about the life you're already living, because I guarantee you there is something there that you can talk about. And to bring things full circle, even if you travel all the way across the world but keep your eyes closed, your adventure ultimately will be nothing much. That's something that goes for you. That's something that goes for everyone. Anyway, as you can probably see, maybe not see by now because of this angle, but the sun is starting to get real low, which means you know what time it is. It's time for the break fast. Bane again. Till next time.
Ano ko lao?